Hello, I'm Valentin Mandace from Historic Houses of Romania, Case de Epoque, and I would like to welcome you to my podcast. Today I would like to speak about the architectural monograms, architecturally rendered monograms. The name of the proprietors, especially, who are inscribed on the buildings, on their buildings, or their owners. If you wander in a big town like Bucharest and its old parts and you are having a keen eye, it's easy to discover these letters inscribed on gates, on balconies, on prominent places like pediments of the houses, under the windows, at the bottom of the balconies. They are the monograms, the initials of the names of the proprietors of the past, of the last 100 years or so, 150 years, since most of the Bucharest architecture dates. They can find throughout the country, even in provinces like Transylvania, which has a deep Western influence, and obviously throughout the world in all the historic architecture. Why we have so many monograms on houses? It's a phenomenon, as I said, which is quite well spread, especially in the 19th century. 19th century is the century of industrialization. If the Industrial Revolution starts in England in the 18th century, then it spreads throughout Europe and the rest of the world, North American continent and other places. And with the rise of the industrial world and also of industrial agriculture, industrial scale agriculture, like was the case here in Southeast Europe, in a place where is Romania, which was famous in the 19th century as one of the bread baskets of Europe, the grain producing areas. So you have also this economic wealth from industrial agriculture, industrial scale agriculture. With all of this wealth, we have the rise of the middle classes. Middle classes are very aspirational. They want to be like the betters, like the aristocrats, or even the crown heads. You know that the kings, queens, the aristocrats like dukes, counts, and many other titles like this, they had their own letters with head letters with their monograms. The royal ciphers, for example, which are again a very stylized monogram or of that royal, and obviously the middle classes wanted to emulate them, so they put this, imitated them in these monograms, not only on the buildings, obviously, in everything, as the aristocrats or the kings and queens did, having the monogram embroidered on their napkins, on their lingeries and everything, having a monogram put on, even on the bathroom set. So that was the case again with the middle classes. But our focus now are the monograms in Bucharest, for example, and some other parts of Romania, and by extrapolation you can put them, you can detect them on the architecture of the rest of the world, especially in urban setting architecture, most often in the 19th century, with this rise of the middle classes and their aspirations to emulate the aristocracy. It goes with some syncopes even in the 1930s, in the Art Deco period. So let's chart some of them. I have here a selection for you, which I got earlier. And let's see how these monograms are unfurling in a big town like Bucharest. As I said, they are everywhere. I start with an aristocratic one, which is the oldest, which I found in Bucharest. Is this one on a piece of furniture, a kind of sofa, Ottoman sofa, belonging to the Prince Alexander Moruzi. Moruzi was a Phanariot prince, Greek prince, charged by the Ottomans to govern Wallachia, and they also governed Moldavia, They governed these places for about 100 years, not very reputable, I have to say. They introduced high-scale Ottoman corruption, which is still prevalent here, but nevertheless, they were in the time of the Enlightenment, and through the Greek Enlightenment, they brought here the Enlightenment ideas. Anyway, the design of the furniture, it's a kind of blend between Ottoman traditions and Baroque ones, which started to be felt in Istanbul at that time. And from Istanbul, they spread to Wallachia, for example, here where Bucharest is, and gave birth in the 18th century or even late 17th century of the local indigenous Wallachian or Brinkovan style. So here's the monogram of Moruzzi from late 18th century. Where are these monograms seen on the architectural places most often? That one was the first one which I encountered in Bucharest, I mean the oldest one. Let's see on the balconies. For example, this Rotaron pear-shaped balconies, which is one of the architectural hallmark of Bucharest. Most often they have the monogram of the owner inscribed here in Rotaron in the middle. This is JD, for example. Where this one is a Neo-Romanian style column capital with the monogram put over here. E, it has a bit of Slavic Greek feel of it, the shape of the letter, in tone with the national romantic ideas of these styles that they want to emulate, that medieval past when the locals wrote mostly in Slavonic. And also, you know that on top of the columns in the Byzantine manner, the monograms, the emperors had the monograms in the churches, like in Hagia Sophia, for example. It's a bit of emulation of those ideas of their betters, let's put it that way. Sometimes you found them in the houses, on the windows or mirrors, or like this house from the 1910th in Bertelo area of Bucharest. It's on a bezeled mirror, crystal mirror, and you have here a very complicated flamboyant monogram like a T, A and an S together. Where on the pediment of the houses, this is a oblong-shaped house, wagon-type house of the middle classes, lower middle classes of Bucharest of the 1900s, and you have here the monograms in between the inauguration year 1904 and in the middle is MV. Or here on the corner of the house, again it's in association with the inauguration year of the house, a kind of MA or MT, hard to say, this kind of curly, wiggly letters. 1897, a kind of very provincial Art Nouveau. That is what I call Little Paris, a provincial interpretation. Or sometimes on chimney stacks. This is a Beaux-Arts-style house from the 1900s in Moșlor area, belonging to a corrupt politician, former mayor of the Sector 1 of Bucharest, who is now on trial for corruption. So let's hope that the justice will prevail. But the house below is the monogram of the initial owner of the builder, not of that mayor. It's IB, for example, over here. Or this one is the fan light, let's put it that way, this kind of porthole of a doorway in the center of Bucharest, in Amze area. Very complicated monogram. This one, already we can see the Art Nouveau of the 1900s, and AGJ. This is the ironwork of a window from the Belle Epoque times. This is one is on a gate. On the gates they are very prominent again. It's a G. Again on the ironwork of a window of a doorway, TD. Or this one, proper Art Nouveau on a gate, CS. You can see this whiplash kind of motif proper to the Art Nouveau. Or this one, it's a mix-up, provincial mix-up between Art Nouveau, Neo-Rococo, and also this kind of Orientalist, Ottoman kind of thing, early Neo-Romanian, on a pediment of a house in Gara de Nord area, northern train station of Bucharest. And we jump to the Art Deco on the gate, for example. It's interesting that this late 19th century, up until the Great War, La Belle Epoque, monograms, which are very frequent and a large quantity, if I can put it that way, ample quantity in Bucharest, they are not, this fashion doesn't really go into the Neo-Romanian style, which emerges and gets fashionable, is the fashion of the day in the early years after the Great War, or just before the Great War. New Romanian, the national style, doesn't really use monograms, but in very infrequent cases. It starts again to become fashionable in the Art Deco in the 1930s, but not so much like in the La Belle Epoque times, late 19th century up until the Great War. So this gate has the monogram and V and then A, or perhaps even an M, depending how you interpret. This one, again on the gate, is an M. It's like the tag of a car from the 1930s. Or sometimes I found even in the countryside, the peasants take the fashions of their betters from the urban areas. For example, this one is from Horezu, southwestern Romania. IB with some kind of ethnographic, pagan kind of symbols above, 1930. Horezu is a ceramic producing area, and this one is made from ceramics. And also I noticed these monograms going on in the countryside up until 1960s and 70s in vernacular architecture in communist times. Again, on Art Deco doorway, you can see the monogram in the middle, an M, and also perhaps this one, it's a V and an E over here. So even now, sometimes people put monograms on their luggages, napkins, for example. Napkins are not used anymore. You have this kind of paper tissues, or sometimes on their luggage. Myself, I afforded myself a bit of indulgence, and my business case, you can see that it's very Spartan and filled one made from canvas, and there's the seller to describe here my monogram, VM, for example. So I am a follower of fashion, but from the La Belle Epoque ×1. So I hope that I gave you a good idea about this important chapter of expression, identity expression in architectural rendering, and not only. It's very interesting, very amply expressed. It deserves PhDs in font, lettering, and how they were used, history of the families. It's a vast subject. And through this kind of podcast, I hope that I will spark more interest, especially on the heritage here in Bucharest and Romania and Southeast Europe. So I hope that you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see each other very soon. Thank you and goodbye.